Hi guys, welcome back, and today we're going to be going over factoring trinomials. So when we were multiplying binomials before, right, when we took x plus 3 times x minus 7, and we multiplied that out, we did this thing where we multiplied each number. That's when we were multiplying them. Now, factoring, again, if we remember our greatest common factor, is kind of like division, right? Like we're taking something out that's a multiple. And so here, when we did that x plus 3 times x minus 7, we would end up getting a trinomial like that once we simplified our middle terms and combined like terms. And now we're going to go the opposite way. So we're going to start with something like this, and we're going to figure out how to factor it into two binomials. And this is factoring, right? Remember factoring, or factors are, two factors are like two numbers that multiply together to get another number. Well, that's really all this is. It's one chunk in parentheses multiplied by another chunk, right? Two factors. So that's why it's called factoring still. And so for our first example, it says, look at the example in our warm-up. What do you notice about the numbers? Where does each term in the trinomial come from? So there's a couple patterns to notice, right? And that's that this x squared just comes from this x times x, right? And then, so that's not too interesting yet. I think we could see that one. But I'm really focused on these two right now. So the first one I want to focus on is, where does this negative 21 come from? And if we remember multiplying it out, negative 21, similar to how we got x squared, comes from positive 3 times negative 7. So those last two numbers have to multiply together to get that negative 21. And then where does this negative 4x come from? That negative 4x actually comes from adding those things, right? So notice we have multiplication in blue and addition in green. So those two numbers multiplied together get negative 21 and added together get negative 4x. So let's keep that in mind moving forward. So we're going to, multiply some binomials again. Something we should be used to at this point. But this time I really just want us to look for some patterns. So let's go through this. We have x times x, which is x squared. We have x times 4, which is 4x. And we have 8 times x, which is 8x. And we have, as soon as my screen comes back on, 8 times 4, which is 32. And then simplifying, x squared, 4x plus 8x is 12x with plus 32. And now, here again, notice we kind of have the same pattern. This 32 comes from multiplying 8 and 4, and this 12x comes from adding 8 and 4. We're going to do this a couple more times just so we really get that pattern down. So now, same thing, z times z is z squared. Z times 3 is plus 3z. Negative 6 times z is minus 6z. And negative 6 times negative 3 is negative 18. And when we combine like terms in the middle, plus 3z minus 6z is going to be minus 3z. And then minus 18. And again, notice we have the same pattern emerging, right? We have negative 6 times positive 3 gets us our negative 18. And we have our negative 6 plus 3 getting us the negative 3z. So now I want us to kind of maybe use this pattern so that we don't need this middle step anymore. Let's just go straight there. So I know I'm going to get p times p, which is a p squared. And now I know that middle term is these two things added together, right? We're going to add those two. So negative 10 plus negative 3 is going to be minus 13p. And then the last one is going to be those two things multiply together. Negative times negative is a positive. 10 times 3 is 30. And so that should be our answer, right? Where that is the two end pieces multiplied together, and this is the two end pieces added together. So the positive 30 comes from multiplying. I think I might have said add, I might not have. But yeah, so maybe if we're comfortable with it, we could start jumping straight there without having to do this middle term. But that comes with getting comfortable. If you're not comfortable, go ahead and do the middle term. But it's going to be kind of essential to understand how to go backwards with it. And so just a pattern to see here, we're going to have x squared plus 7x or minus 7x, sorry, not plus 7x. Minus 7x. Now we have plus 7x. And 7 times negative 7 is negative 49. And so this is a good pattern to notice because minus 7x and plus 7x cancel each other out. And this is just a good pattern to notice because notice what we have up here. We almost have the same thing since we have a plus and a minus. And when that happens, our middle terms are going to cancel out. We're going to be left with a perfect square on both sides. And now this is the last one. Remember, y plus 4, the entire thing squared, actually means y plus 4 times y plus 4. And let's try and notice the pattern here. We're going to get y squared plus 4y plus another 4y plus 16. And this pattern is a little more difficult to see. But we can kind of see that the end here is a perfect square, like when we have this squared here. The end is a perfect square, and the middle is double this 4. Just something to kind of notice and take in mind. But now the real meat and bones. So now we need to factor, right? Factor means going the other way, right? So we have to remember what we noticed, right? So when I see something like this where there's an invisible 1 in front of that x squared, I know that my two binomials, I'm just going to set them up right away, and I know they're going to need x and x to get that x squared, right? Now what goes in between, remember we had to multiply to this last number, so I'm going to write multiply to 32. I'm going to draw an x. And then remember they needed to add to the middle number. And the signs matter, so we have to add to negative 12. And, now it's just a matter of thinking what two numbers do that. Let's see. And then if you ever struggle with guessing what two things multiply to a number and add to another one, you can just start listing the multiples. But I think negative 8 and negative 4 are going to do it, right? Because negative 8 times negative 4 is positive 32, and added together, they're negative 12. So all you do from there is stick it into those parentheses. And I'll show you another extra trick in a second. So this time we have z, but same thing, right? We know that it's going to look like two binomials. And I know I can stick z in both. Now, just for an extra dosage, what does this plus sign here tell me? That tells me that I'm either going to need a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative, right? And then how do I know which one it is? Well, this sign right here tells me that I have to add to a negative number, and there's no way two positives are going to add to a negative, so they both have to be negative. That's an extra step you can take if you want to be sure that you're getting the right numbers. And then again, we follow our pattern from before, right? We have to multiply to that last number, 25, and we have to add to that middle number, which is negative 10. And I think negative 5 and negative 5 do that, and that makes sense because we needed two negatives, right? And that's the answer. And then a nicer way to write that is z minus 5, and then times itself is squared. Just a note. Now this one, I think we're going to get a little faster now, right? We can just write t and t right away. And we're going to need to multiply to that last number, 16. and add to 17. These ones always freak people out, but it's just 16 and 1, right? 16 and 1 multiplied to 16, and they add to 17, and they're both going to be plus. And then for our last one, we know it's going to be x and x. And then we need to multiply to negative 16. And add to negative 6. And what two numbers do that? I think positive 8 and negative 8 and a positive 2 will get us there, because negative 8 times positive 2 is negative 16, and negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. Negative 8 plus 2. And I'm just going to throw this in there at the end. So this is the answer, right? That's your answer. But to check your answer to make sure you got it right, if you multiply this out and get what you started with, then you've done it right. So x times x would be x squared. Minus 8 times x is going to be minus 8x. And then I kind of went backwards here, but that's okay. X times 2 is going to be positive 2x. And then negative 8 times positive 2 is negative 16. And then look at that. We get x squared minus 6x minus 16, which is what we started with. So we know we got it right. And that is going to wrap it up for factoring trinomials.